You might have heard the saying that it takes a village to raise a child. For most of us, we already have a natural village. Family and friends nearby who can help support us. We probably also have a living wage job. We're likely able to access and take care of the immediate needs of our families and access any additional assistance we might need. These factors give our families a chance to thrive. Well, for some, that village has to be built. If you're a family that struggles to make a living wage, you don't have the education to get a job that pays well, and you don't have healthy family or friend support, shame and blame for shortcomings are in no short supply. In that circumstance, you have no village and you're left to figure it out on your own. I'm a social worker here with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. Every day, I encounter families who don't have a natural village, and it's my job to help them build one. I'm going to tell you a story about a young man with a common theme. And as I do, I want you to imagine what it would be like to be him. I want you to think about how you would face the challenges he faced with his limited resources, not the resources you have. How would you do it? Would you succeed? This young man and his girlfriend welcomed a newborn baby girl into the world. What should have been one of the most joyous moments in their lives was terrifying. Their greatest desire was to parent their new baby. Their love for her ran so deep already. But there was an issue. Both parents were addicted to methamphetamine and unhoused. There were limited treatment options for the parents, so shortly after birth, the baby was placed into foster care and assigned to my caseload. Grieving the loss of caring daily for their own child, the parents continued in their drug use. It was the only way they knew how to cope with this loss. Their support system was non-existent. I continued to try and engage both parents with limited success. Months later, the young man recognized that he had a monumental choice to make. Continue as he had been, or separate from his partner in order to get clean and sober, with the ultimate goal of bringing his daughter home. The mother wasn't ready. So this young man boldly chose to walk away from that life and search for a new one. Unhoused, addicted, and alone. He garnered the strength and humility needed to approach the doorstep of a homeless shelter, seeking a roof over his head. Although the shelter was open to families, including parents working to reunify, they did not admit single fathers. He was turned away, but offered the opportunity to engage in drug treatment and other classes they had available. The young man continued to show up for their programming, even though he didn't have a place to sleep or a vehicle to get him there. After months of working the program, the shelter offered this young man a room, a glimpse of hope, a glimpse at what support feels like. You see, he didn't have any healthy support from family or friends. In fact, those closest to him were those who contributed to his substance abuse. There was no one to fill in the gaps when things didn't go as planned. His daughter's foster mom was nice enough, but under the surface, she was hoping that she could adopt his little girl, which meant him failing. How must that feel? He would take the bus wherever he needed to go, often taking hours. The day finally came when he could have unsupervised visits with his daughter at his place, and he was thrilled. The hard work was finally paying off. A couple times a week, he would take a bus an hour and a half one way to pick her up, and then ride the bus with his toddler back the same hour and a half. They'd have a few hours together at his place before taking the return bus ride. He cherished this time with his daughter, but he still had hurdles to jump. He was required to call what is referred to as color line each day to determine if a urine sample was needed, checking for drug use. If his color was called, he'd ride yet another bus to submit that sample. He was also required to continue substance abuse treatment, attend parenting classes, and to submit to other requirements of the shelter. There was a lot to keep track of and make happen. To add on to that, he had to prioritize employment and work around everything else in his schedule to keep a job. He needed that job to prove that he could take care of the everyday needs of his daughter and work towards securing longer-term housing, never losing sight of the goal to bring his daughter home. His schedule was an exhausting one, with very little room for error. The odds were stacked against him, but he'd made a promise to be there for his little girl, to figure out how to get things right. Now, I'm a capable and successful individual, and when I consider what this young man had to accomplish on a daily basis with very little support, I don't think I could have done it. Many families impacted by the child welfare system have encountered huge hurdles in their lives. Often, they aren't starting out with fair and just life circumstances. Like the father I told you about, many struggling families lack adequate resources and supports needed to succeed. Our mission at DCYF is to protect children and strengthen families so they flourish. Knowing what youth and families are up against, how do we fulfill this mission? Let's be honest. We could do a better job supporting families and keeping them together. Family separation through foster care has been a primary intervention strategy when families are struggling. There's a myth in child welfare that's existed since its inception. That myth is that child welfare knows what's best for children and can do better for children than their own families can. You don't have to look far to find evidence to the contrary. In 2021, the overall graduation rate for foster youth in Washington State was 48%, compared to 83% for other students that same year. Nationwide, approximately 20% of former foster youth will become homeless within the first 4 years after aging out. In one study, nearly 40% of foster care alumni interviewed reported being unhoused or lacking stable housing at some point. 1/4 of foster care alumni will be involved with the criminal justice system within 2 years of leaving care. Youth in foster care are 2 times more likely than war veterans to be diagnosed with PTSD. Research on the outcomes for foster youth tell a very disheartening story. We realize that maltreatment, rather than out-of-home placement, could be argued as a reason for some degree of these results. However, researchers have started isolating the impact of out-of-home placement from the experience of maltreatment. What they're finding is that out-of-home placement has little to no benefit for youth who have experienced maltreatment and can actually cause more harm. In fact, 63% of youth who are removed from their homes are removed for neglect, often related to poverty versus abuse. Those families, if safe for their children, need help building their village. They don't need the devastation of having their children placed in someone else's care. The good news is that at DCYF, we're investing in the one resource that can provide what's best for children, their families. We're doing this through Family First. Family First is a step in the direction of creating a proactive system of support for families in crisis. It's not the first step, it's not the only one. It builds upon many other initiatives and programs that have started turning the tide toward keeping families together, supporting families as a unit, and honoring families' voices. For the first time ever, we're able to shift federal funding from paying for out-of-home foster care to preventative services to keep children safely at home. By increasing access to supportive services, Family First will also focus on improving the well-being of youth and families already experiencing DCYF involvement. In my earlier story, had Family First been in place, we could have offered this young man intensive in-home supports and treatment options, potentially saving him and his daughter from the trauma of foster care. In order to fulfill the intent of Family First, we must also adequately support people like me, the caseworkers doing this work every day. We have a workforce at DCYF that came into this field with a desire to see families succeed, that work tirelessly for the families they serve. Our workforce invests in youth and families, doing their best with the time and resources they have. But let me be clear. There's a big difference between doing your best with what you have and having what you need to do your best. Let me say that one more time. There's a big difference between doing your best with what you have and having what you need to do your best. The ability to effectively engage families and achieve solid case coordination goes well beyond the individual worker. Most get into this line of work to be a part of families creating positive change in their lives. Over time, being a part of an overburdened system can lead to a feeling of learned helplessness, feeling that very little of what we can do can actually impact families for the better. Washington's Family First Plan advocates for adjustments to caseloads that will allow caseworkers the space needed to effectively engage families. I do not intend to say that child welfare is the village necessary to help parents raise their children, but rather that the broader community is what is needed. When as a community we can find a pathway for families to seek and receive support without a call to CPS, we'll have made great headway towards families having what they need to succeed. A community pathway such as this will allow child welfare to target effort and resources toward youth and families who really do need child welfare intervention to remain safe. Through Family First, DCYF will create a culture of community participation in child safety and family well-being, with the intention of reducing the stigma of seeking help. I was in the grocery store a while back, and a man held my gaze. He was smiling at me. It took me a few moments to identify how I knew him, and when I did, I noticed a school-age girl standing next to him. 6 years and 7 months, clean and sober, he shared. He did it. The young man from my earlier story had overcame the odds. So very many families that keep their children in their care or reunify do so despite the system, not because of it. I'll say that one more time. So very many families that keep their children in their care or reunify do so despite the system, not because of it. Child welfare should not be another barrier that parents have to overcome in order to parent their children. Family First is shifting practice to be an approach where child welfare professionals stand beside parents and truly partner with them to identify their needs and build a village of support. In summation, I want to share that it isn't about us versus them, or child welfare involved versus not child welfare involved. It's about all of us and our collective responsibility to help ensure that all of Washington's children grow up safe and healthy, thriving and nurtured by family and community.